Well, hi, folks. I'm Chris McKitterick, director of the Ad Astra Center for Science Fiction and the Speculative Imagination at the University of Kansas. We're part of the Achievement and Assessment Institute, one of 12 designated research institutes at the University of Kansas. AAI and its centers partner with agencies to improve the lives of children and adults through academics, employment, career advancement, and building healthy environments, working to help children, adults, and communities succeed. This is our second public event. Thanks for joining us. And thank you also for those who are joining us online. Big thank you to the Lawrence Public Library for hosting us a few days ago. Today we are re-recording here in the Ad Astra Center's offices because the video didn't work. So, hi. The Ad Astra Center brings together creatives, scientists, educators, and fans of speculative fiction to study and create work that changes the world. Through a rich series of expert talks, workshops, and masterclasses, social media inspiration, and more, like today's presentation, we seek to build bridges between STEM and the arts by showcasing cutting-edge research and helping creatives engage with forces changing the world. If you're a speculative fiction writer or want to be, check out our Science into Fiction Writing Workshop series, starting with a story development session this coming weekend, that's November 12 to 13, a month of available hosted write-ins, and then a weekend of speculative fiction critique workshopping of the weekend of December 17 to 18, where we'll help you revise whatever story you come up with in that month for your intended goals. Our events are available both in person and streaming on the YouTube channel to increase availability and accessibility for folks who are local or around the world. So today we're going to hear from Dr. Barbara Kerr and Christopher Taka about creativity and the brain. Dr. Kerr holds an endowed chair as Distinguished Professor of Counseling Psychology here at KU and is an American Psychological Associate Fellow. Her research has focused on the development of talent, creativity, and optimal states while training psychologists and counselors to be talent scouts who provide positive, strengths-based services. She founded the Guidance Laboratory for Gifted and Talented at the University of Nebraska, was Associate Director of the Balin Blanc National Center for Gifted and Talented at the University of Iowa, and co-director of the National Science Foundation Projects for Talented and At-Risk Girls at Arizona State University. She's editor of the Encyclopedia of Giftedness, Creativity, and Talent Development, author of Smart Girls, A New Psychology for Girls, Women, and Giftedness, a handbook for counseling gifted and talented, co-author of Smart Boys, Talent, Masculinity, and the Search for Meaning, counseling girls and women, and more than 100 articles, chapters, and papers in giftedness, talent, and creativity. Dr. Kerr directs the Counseling Laboratory for the Exploration of Optimal States at KU, a research through service program that identifies and guides creative adolescents. Finally, those who participate in the upcoming writing workshop will have the opportunity to hear expert feedback from Barbara. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Barbara Kerr, who will introduce her colleague.
Thank you. Again, I am Barbara Kerr, and with me is principal inventor of the virtual reality EEG-enabled system that we're going to be demonstrating for you today. And together we're going to talk about the science of the flow consciousness state of creativity. And then Chris will talk to you about the development of the system. Then we'll do a demonstration, which I know you're eager to see. I also want to note that we'll be introducing our volunteer when we do our demonstration. Okay, so let's talk about flow. We began to understand soon after we began counseling creative students in 2006 that the usual ways of providing career development don't work for creative people. First of all, the pathways to a career in creative writing or art are being an inventor, like Chris, or being a musician, or even being a creative leader or creative healer. Those pathways are invisible. It's not like becoming an accountant, where it's a linear pathway straight through from getting A's in math in high school, getting A's in math, majoring in accounting in college, sitting for the CPA exam. Bam, you're an accountant and doing people's taxes the rest of your life. That's not how creative pathways are. So we knew right away that one of the big differences is we had to help people find invisible pathways. The second problem is that our society does so very little to encourage creative young people to see their creativity as being important. They say, oh, you'll never be able to support yourself as a science fiction writer. You'll never be able to support yourself as an artist. And as a result, a lot of people's creative interests are crushed by the time they're teenagers. We also learned that many of our most eminent people in music, art, writing were never recognized in high school as having talent. And up to a third of the people who've been identified by our laboratory as highly creative were never even nominated for a gifted program. And our students have patents. They've published poetry. They've had dance shows. They've had gallery shows. These are extraordinarily talented people who have not been recognized and are not getting the encouragement that they need. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to help them to see their creativity not only as a great gift, but as something that is real? How are we going to help them to see that their minds were able to do something that is rare and wonderful and make it real? And that's when we realized that the way to do it was to help them to find their flow consciousness. To a word we use is we reify flow, we make it real. So when we talk about flow, we are talking about, first of all, the aliases. These are the things that flow is masqueraded as being in the zone, our runner's high, our unconscious, or being locked in, our basketball player popping off. These are things that people think are flow, and they're very close to it, especially for dancers and creative athletes. But actual flow, creative flow, is different in that it's a consciousness state that we see only under certain conditions. The requirements to have a flow state of consciousness are that there's a balance of enjoyment and challenge. So flow doesn't come when you're just doing something you like to do. Instead, flow happens when you are so challenged that you're not even sure if your expertise is equal to it, but you're going to try. You don't know if you actually can make this sonnet work. You don't know if you can actually get this particular app that you're developing to work, but you're going to try. So you have clear goals. I want to develop an app. I want to write a sonnet. You have a clear goal, but it's open so that if something incredible happens along the way, you might change. So that you might be, for instance, composing one song on the guitar, and all of a sudden a chord comes to you out of nowhere, and you go, oh no, I'm going this way. This is great. The other thing is you get immediate feedback when you're in flow, but that feedback is not coming from anybody outside of you. It's not coming from a teacher or a mentor. The feedback is coming from the work itself. So you're looking at your painting and going, that's the right color. Oh, wait a minute, but that's not. No, okay, I need to change that. I need to highlight that. Okay, I'm going to try this. So that what you're doing is you're getting immediate feedback from the word from the work itself. If you're writing, your ear, your inside auditory system is hearing the words and going, that doesn't sound right. All right, let me change it up this way. Yeah, that's right. Immediate feedback. You have focus, and your focus is so intent on what you're doing that you lose track of time. You lose track of other people's valuing of your work. You lose track of your bodily needs. So, for instance, you say you're only going to devote about 2 hours to your writing because you know you need to get to sleep at a decent hour. So, at about 10:30, you start writing, and suddenly you're challenging yourself. You're trying something you haven't tried before, and all of a sudden the characters in your story are starting to write themselves, and you get so excited that you know where you're going, and you keep going and you keep going, and suddenly you look up at the clock and you look at the window and the sun is rising. You've lost track of time. You suddenly find out that you're incredibly hungry and you need to pee really bad, and all of your bodily needs come back when you finish that flow state. But during that time, you were completely unaware. Um, and finally, you're in control to some degree. To some degree, creative people know the conditions that are going to kick off their flow. Like many writers know that after a certain hour at night, it's gonna kick off. They're gonna be able to do it. They know what place is best for them. So you have some control over it, but nobody thinks they have full control. So part of our invention here is to help people to figure out what that is. So in the brain, we see concentration and relaxation, coordination, and a balance of risk and reward. And the most fascinating thing about this is that it's paradoxical. Concentration takes place in the executive functioning part of the brain. Up here, relaxation is the default mode network, which is here. And normally they're almost mutually exclusive. You cannot concentrate on solving a problem while also feeling kind of blissful. And in the flow state, you're combining a sense of bliss and oneness with problem solving and concentration. And that emerges as something you'll see called gamma. All the parts of the brain are working together. Don't ever ask us where is creativity in the brain. It's everywhere. Here's a little picture of flow in action. This is Sika Ann. She is the head of the Lawrence Circus Arts program, and we put the EEG headset on her while she was going into flow doing the hoop and trapeze. And because the flow not only was in the front of her brain, but it was also her sensory motor cortex, the EEGs were, the gammas, as you'll see, were blowing us out of the water. It was off the chart. Now we get to the brain waves. Brain waves are can be conceptualized along a spectrum. And this is a spectrum essentially of arousal. And we have delta for deep sleep. We have theta, and that's the transition to wakefulness. It's called hypnagogic or hypnopompic. It's that place right when you first wake up or right when you're falling asleep. And that tends to be where we get a lot of disinhibited ideas. Sometimes very good ideas come in that state. It's also characteristic of a deep meditative state. Then we have low alpha, which is a pure meditative state, what you would get in meditation where the ego falls away. And then in high alpha is intense awareness, oneness. So it's just a little stronger from the relaxed alpha state. And then we move to a higher arousal state, which is alertness. And alertness in counseling, as you'll see, we can even interpret that sometimes as threat. So that anxiety shows up as low beta, but it is also readiness, like ready to work. ready to go at it. And it's only the labels our brain gives that arousal level that makes it either excited anticipation or fear. Um, and part of what we do when we're training musicians, writers, artists is we help them transform their fear and performance anxiety into anticipation and alertness. Then at high beta, we have concentration and problem solving, intense concentration, trying to solve problems in the moment. Your mind is moving very fast. You're working really hard, and you'll see beta show up. Um, then we get low gamma, where you're beginning to see the rewards of your work. You're seeing aha experiences. And that, going back to the writer working on a sonnet, the person is first kind of in a relaxed state, then becomes very alert and says, "Oh, wow, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Oh my gosh, I've got to the last two lines and they've got to be perfect. They've got to be right." Imagine Robert Frost getting to the end of, the woods in the snowy evening, stopping by the woods in the snowy evening, getting to the last line, and he thinks he has to rhyme something with but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And, imagine you're at that seat. You're, what am I going to do? What's the last line going to be? What's the last line going to be? And he goes, "Why don't I just repeat it? And miles to go before I sleep." And then, boom, you get a little hit of gamma. And that's the aha experience. Like, wow, that's the insight. And that's the beginning of flow. And then high flow, where it's a mid gamma, a very high hertz. It is a state where, I guess you'd say, the voltage is so high that your brain, and the electricity in your brain could light an LED bulb. Okay. And that's why flow is so different from all these other states. And it requires such expertise in a domain that people who are not expert in a particular creative domain may never really experience that high state of flow. So what we get desirable results, we get fulfillment, we get learning, we get loss of time. But what's most important to us at Cleos is that it confirms when people can see their flow, it confirms for them that it's real, it's unique, it's something that is a gift that they have that is worth devoting an entire life to. So I'd like to turn it over to Chris Taka now, who will talk about how he joined Cleos to be able to learn about counseling in order to develop a special virtual reality app. Take it away, Chris.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Chris Taka, and I'm a PhD candidate in bioengineering here at KU. And I've been working with Barb since 2018 on my dissertation research. And should I tell the story a little bit?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. And so basically, I have been working on developing a virtual reality therapy system to help facilitate effective remote counseling. And we started this in 2018, but since the pandemic, it's become really, really relevant that it's just really important for people. And I started this research because I have a deep personal connection to wanting to help people with this struggle. It really came from a place in my life when in 2018 I had just graduated from undergraduate school. And I remember just like celebrating. We had finished school. We were talking about the amazing things in our life that were to come. I had accepted to go to grad school in Kansas. So I was thinking about moving to Kansas, what's that going to be like, and everything like that. And it was only like a week or so after that that one of my good friends that I just graduated, I was just celebrating with, I found out that he took his life. And it was a really, really tough experience for me. It was unexpected. I didn't really know how to process it and how to handle it. But I remember thinking when I came to Kansas that I really wanted do something and devote something with my skill set, what I had learned at college, what I knew I could learn to really help someone like him. And I remember it took me a long time, like meeting with professors in engineering and neuroscience and psychology, trying to find the right people. And I got introduced to Barb. And I remember it was the just like a vastly different experience than I had talking with professors ever. I remember I met her the first time in her office. She had tea, she had cookies. We sat down together. We talked for, I don't know, probably like 3 hours about like, wow, I can't believe I'm talking to an engineer. I've always wanted to talk to all these amazing ideas about what we can do for counseling, what's out there. We talked about virtual reality, EEG, neuroscience, science fiction, everything. And I remember going back after that day and really drawing up the first ideas of what we had for, didn't look like what it is now, but you'll get to see what it turned into. And I'm really grateful to be able to share that we actually, over the past summer, we were able to do our first real human subject study, comparing the VR counseling to Zoom counseling to see if it really is a viable and reliable option for counseling. And we found really solid results that for people where Zoom counseling maybe isn't the best for them, if they're not in the environment that they feel comfortable in, feel safe in, if they're a little bit anxious about being face-to-face with a counselor, if there's someone who is isolated either geographically or psychologically, we can give really, really quality and amazing counseling sessions using the system. And I really believe the people that came in, it made a real impact on that. So,
Yeah. So that's the story of how this system came into being. And I'm proud to say that we got our U.S. patent last year, and we'll be, working on either developing a venture or licensing. We're just very excited that we're going to be able to use this. I also wanted to mention to all of you science fiction writers and creative people out there in the world that we'll be doing our guidance and career development for creative adults this year for the first time, and creative communities, so that whether you'd like to work with us online or you'd like to come to the University of Kansas and do the virtual reality with us, we would just welcome you and make it possible for you to do that. We'll be doing that from February until May. We'll be providing that. We have an endowment in order to do it for free and very cheap. So with that little blurb out of the way, we're going to go ahead and set up the virtual reality system. And what you will see is we will be going through a protocol to help a person learn to differentiate their flow state from just plain relaxation and from concentration by doing a visualization. And Jose, will you pronounce your last name for me?
Elizondo.
Jose Elizondo is going to be our volunteer today. He is a science fiction writer and also a doctoral student in educational psychology. So we're happy to have him as a volunteer. We're pretty sure he knows how to go in flow. Why don't you explain what you're doing as you're doing it there, Chris?
Okay, so first I'm going to get Jose set up with the EEG. This is just a simple EEG, the Muse 2. It's commercially available, and it's just measuring basic brain waves from the frontal lobe. So, and we're going to have that live stream, and in counseling, it's live stream so that the counselors can see emotions in real time. But for this demonstration, it'll be for Barb to be able to talk him through the flow demonstration. So just getting it connected to the computer. And then once I get them connected with the EEG, then we'll get them in the VR. And I think after the fact, we'll stream so you can see what the VR looks like. But we'll just be taking him to a comforting place to do the session. Okay, so the EEG should be connected. And then, perfect, it is. Okay, and then I'm going to get the VR and I'll put it in Zoom.
Okay. And I'll mention at this point that that the entire environment of the VR was developed according to our knowledge of the common factors that make therapy work, and that is a healing environment, an empathic relationship between a therapist and a client, a rationale, that is giving a little bit of knowledge about what seems this behavior to be about, and a ritual, which is enacting the suggestions. And so we think that this VR creates a healing environment. They can choose environments. Today, actually, we will choose for you. We'll choose the outdoor waterfall environment, but there's also a nice log cabin with a fire. And there's also a replica of Sigmund Freud's office that Chris and I were fortunate enough to visit in Vienna and take notes on so that we could replicate his office and the feel of that. There will people usually choose their archetypal healer. At this point, you'll be working with a Mother Earth type, which is an archetype of one kind of healer, the mother. But we also have a wizard who is the elder wise man archetype of a healer. We will have a trickster healer who is a mischievous healer. And finally, there will be a furry animal for those people who would rather talk to an archetype of a soft, warm, safe creature.
Okay.
So putting on the VR headset.
Okay.
Kristen, you're going to be in charge of asking Trivial Pursuit questions.
Sure.
Okay, so let's put this somewhere.
The counselor's voice will be the real-time voice that's being voiced by the avatar. And in this case, it'll be my voice.
Okay, so right now he's just getting a little bit of instructions of how to move, but then we'll get him into place.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to... So do you see...
Jose,
Mm-hmm.
feeling the space there?
Yes.
Getting to know it?
Do you see the cabin?
I'm looking for the cabin.
Yeah.
There we go. And I'd like to invite you to come and join me in that location.
At the cabin?
No, in the
Sorry.
portal. The portal.
Look
Through
at the
the
little
portal.
portal there. Jump into the portal. I know, you're doing fine. Ah, you've come to Halo Valley. And I see you now there in the distance, Jose. If you want to come a little closer, we'll sit down together and have a chat.
Oh.
There we go. It's close enough.
Yeah, you're going to start moving too.
Okay,
Jones are going
go to the what?
to the pond. Follow you.
Okay, follow me. So follow me with your eyes. I'm taking you to a beautiful place by a pond. There we go. Oh, this is perfect. Yes. We're almost there. Now I want to note that your alpha waves are showing that you're already relaxing. All right. Just let me know when you're ready to go. It's almost there.
She's gonna hang out here, I think.
Here we go. Let's hang out here. All you have to do is just stop right there. Great. So, Jose, in this session, what we're going to do is introduce you to the concept of flow so that you can manage your flow in your daily life. And to do that, first we'll introduce you to your alpha relaxation state, your beta alertness and problem solving state, and finally, we're going to combine those and do a visualization of you doing your creative work. Right now, your alpha waves are in the mid-range, your beta waves are in the mid-range, and your gamma is mid to low, which is what we would expect. But I'm going to start you then with alpha waves with relaxation. And I'm going to ask the small audience that we have here to go along with us because there is a certain amount of emotional contagion that seems to help the person who's relaxing. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to close your eyes and take 10 deep breaths as I count backward from 10. And you'll be going in through your mouth, out through your nose, or however is most comfortable for you. At the count of 10. 9. 8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Feel your whole body go limp now. Make sure your neck and shoulders are all relaxed. One more deep breath. Sink into your chair. Beautiful. And what we're seeing here is that you've got this level, beautiful, even wave of relaxation. In fact, it almost looks like waves on a placid lake. And I'm going to ask you now to describe to me what you were feeling as you went into those placid waves on the lake. What were you aware of?
I would say my lungs filling up. I was listening to your voice. I did feel the air coming through my mouth. Just trying to forget about everyday stuff and just focus on the now.
you did focus on the now from what we're seeing here, and like a practiced meditator, because you really went into a state of mindfulness that was pretty clear. And so I think you're able to identify that state because clearly you went right there. Now I would like to show you a very different state. We're going to have you solve problems. And Chris is going to quiz you with some Trivial Pursuit questions, some easy, some hard, but he'll be asking you everything from some popular culture, maybe a little math, that sort of thing.
Oh boy.
And yes, and math are Trivial Pursuit, like capitals of
Right.
Costa Rica, things like that. And so, Chris, will you start the Trivial Pursuit program? We're going to go 10 questions very fast.
Okay.
Okay.
Just any questions at all.
Any questions at all?
How do you calculate the volume of a sphere?
I have no idea.
And your beta waves just told you had no idea. They got very jagged there. Can you go a little easier than that?
Sure.
He's having to translate into English at the same time.
True. The capital of Cuba.
Havana?
Oh, look at that. Yeah. He had one of those little like spikes of I got it. And in fact, you knew it before you knew it. So we saw the spike was actually before your answer. And that's true. We usually do get the answer in our subconscious before it works its way to the executive part. So go ahead, Chris. Give us another one.
Which was it?
Something.
Interference, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. What's happened?
Actually, he's got the EEG going, so it's perfectly okay for you just to keep
Just
asking
anything? Okay.
questions.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
All right. Let's see. The capital of Kansas.
Topeka.
All
I
right.
knew that one.
Yeah, you weren't even that proud of getting that answer, but you did have a little spike.
What got you interested in science fiction?
Oh boy. I think the fact that I didn't like it to start with.
Oh.
And then I said, I need to write something related to science that other people like me will like. So yeah.
Nice.
Oh, it's very interesting. We almost saw that tooth. We look for a shape that looks like a tooth when a person is really concentrating, and we can get it in flow too. So it's very interesting. Okay, give us another Trivial Pursuit question.
How many stories have you written?
Ay. Okay, so right now I'm writing a short story collection. So I think I've written approximately 10 over there. And then I have written, let's say 10 other more stories that I would consider short stories. I'm working on this novel right now. So this would be my third short novel. I don't know if that counts as a story. And then poetry. So I really like working on poetry. And even though poems are short, I do think that sometimes, you're telling a story through a poem. So I want to say 20 to 30.
Excellent. What was interesting is how relaxed you were while you were talking about. You didn't have to concentrate all that hard. You were pretty relaxed talking about your stories. That was cool. But let's have another Trivial Pursuit question.
How about who wrote Frankenstein, a Modern Prometheus?
Mary Shelley, come on, 1818.
Yeah, you got that.
Which was under a pen name. She couldn't publish it on her own.
Yes, she had to publish it under another name. I love it. We're really not challenging his beta waves that much, but that's kind of cool how you're both relaxed, but you can feel the difference between this and your deep relaxation, right? And what is the difference between being asked a lot of questions and deep relaxation? How's your body different? How's your mind different?
Like I want to react. I want to respond. I I want to get the questions right because I'm competitive. So I do feel like I need that. However, when it comes to math, yeah, I'm gonna quit immediately. But but when it comes to literature, I do feel like that's something that makes you feel passionate about answering. So I want to get those answers right.
Right when you said passionate, you had an overall spike in the overall EEG. Did you see that right there? Passionate. It's great. Yeah. For everybody out there, if you look at this spike on this side, on the left side, you see that spike. That's I feel passionate about it, and it really jumped up there. Well, now you've had the experience of both alpha and beta, and now this is the coolest because now we're going to take you right into your flow state.
Okay.
And I want you to think of a time when you were doing that activity that brings you the most flow. That creative activity
Mm-hmm.
that requires tremendous expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine now that you're sitting down to go to work on the project that's going to challenge you.
Mm-hmm.
You're feeling anticipation and excitement. And now start working and meeting the challenges and solving the problems of this project.
Okay.
I can see that you're getting through those blocks, really moving along through it. And now feel that state of flow coming on where it's perfect. It's as if the work is working itself. You are completely at one with this work. There's the teeth. See the molars?
Yeah.
You just blissed out. And then can you stop and not exactly screenshot, but just stop it right there? Can you make the EEG stop? Like, can you?
Oh.
Oh, don't worry about it. It's okay. Okay, you can stop right now.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you, okay, first of all, I'm going to guess that you were hitting a few little roadblocks, but they weren't big, but it took you a few seconds for each one to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then after quite some time, you suddenly went into this sort of blissful state. And in your EEGs, they dip down so low, it's almost like you went into a dream and then came out of it. That's what I saw. Tell me how much that matches. What was your actual experience?
Perfection.
Yeah.
Yes. Normally, my inspiration for writing comes from my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that what you're saying matches what I feel when I think about my plots for my books. I just go into this state where I feel like I'm dreaming. It's an out of body experience almost,
Mhm.
and then ideas just come to me, and then I just somehow have hands and then put them into words on my keyboard. But I do think that ideas come from that deep state.
Mm-hmm. Well, we sure saw the the big dip. You can see one right here, back there. There was there was a deep state. And like I said, we don't usually see that much of a dip into theta, except with artists. It's interesting because artists are kind of in a dream state all the time when they're painting. And you were writing like an artist paints, at least from our experience of watching people do this.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's a nice compliment.
I'm glad you see it that way. Any other observations that you had about the flow experience that made it different from the trivial pursuit and the relaxation?
I think the challenge was with myself. So I was not trying to please anybody. I was not trying to get anything right. I was not trying to be competitive, but I was trying to solve. Actually, that helped me a lot because this morning I had this writer's block,
Mhm.
and then I didn't know how to, continue this story. And then you gave me this opportunity to relax a little, and then to imagine that I could just get rid of all of the blocks. And then when I hit a wall, then I was like, no, I can push through. I can push through. Make more connections within your story, and then you're gonna be able to say it and convey whatever you want. And I did that. I listened to your voice, and I think that's how I got rid of the roadblocks.
Well, that's exciting. I guess now we're going to have to present this as a cure for writer's block as well.
It did help.
That is great. Yeah, look at that. As I talked about that, you got excited. If you want to take off the VR headset now,
Sure.
normally we kind of like then recede from each
Mhm.
other and you'd go back. But I want you to see a little bit of what your brainwaves look like just in the last few seconds.
Wonderful. Thank you.
This was you when we talked about, well, we could do this for writer's block. You had an insight, like,
Uh-huh.
oh, yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, that would be cool. Do you see that excitement there? And you were actually seemed to be imagining what that would be like
Mhm.
because you see this problem solving here.
Mhm.
And finally, you're still showing signs of flow. I call this the tooth pattern
Mhm.
or a hound's tooth pattern.
Mhm.
And you see that they look like teeth.
Mhm.
And that's very characteristic of flow is that tooth pattern. And we've seen that whether we're looking at heart rate variability or
Mhm.
whether we're looking at brain waves, we get that pattern of
Interesting.
up and down, down,
Mhm.
up, down, down, up, down, down throughout the
Like a
whole
heart.
process. It's very
A
much
brain
like that.
beat.
It's a brain beat.
Mhm.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much
You're
for
very welcome.
doing this with us.
I'm
That's
so happy
great.
that I joined you.
I'm so happy you did too. Now I know that there will be a chance for everybody who has questions to simply ask them online. I imagine in the discussion function, right?
Mhm.
And we'll tune into this place every once in a while and try to answer those questions.
And I have some questions too right now.
All right, please.
All
Should I
right.
start taking things down?
Yes, start taking them down, and we'll try to answer right here.
Hold it up here. All right. So, one of the things a technique that I have used when I have to solve writing problems when I'm running into some sort of either writing block or just an issue, whatever it is to think about the challenge right before I go to sleep. And then during the night, I'll almost always wake up with the solution. What's going on with that? And how can creatives make this intentional and consistent?
Well, you have to let it happen. So often we go to sleep, and I'm guilty of this too, listening to a podcast or occupying our brain in some way. But we have to allow ourselves at least a few nights where we don't do any of those things, but rather that we do the relaxation that I just showed.
Mhm.
Just counting back from 10 with deep breaths. You don't have to do anything fancy. Focusing just on the here and now, the feeling of your body. So you want to have that to relax yourself. And then allow yourself to gently consider your problem.
Mhm.
So don't go at it hard. You're in bed, for heaven's sakes. You're cozy. Don't go at it hard. Go at it gently. And just let the ideas flow. And pretty soon you'll start seeing some associations being made that normally you wouldn't make. You're almost asleep, but you're getting these great associations. You don't have to journal it, you don't have to write it down. Do exactly what you said, and that is just make note of it. It's like, oh, I love this character. I can see developing. I think I need to write in some history and some context for her. Gonna need a flashback here. Cool. Okay. I'm noting that flashback. Good. I've kind of gotten through one of those blocks and I'm going to go to sleep now. Go to sleep. And when you wake up the next morning, it should still be there. Sometimes your dreams keep fooling around with it and might even add some material. And one thing we can do is we can ask ourselves to remember our dreams, but it doesn't happen. It takes about 7 times, 8 times every night of asking yourself to remember your dreams. We don't know why. It just that eventually you ask yourself, I'd like to remember my dreams tonight. And then it starts happening. But be careful what you wish for. You don't need to remember your dreams to be able to have that experience, just having that experience right before going to sleep and as you wake up. So one's a hypnagogic state, one's a hypnopopic state. They're the same thing. Right as you're waking up, go back to where you were the night before, and it'll probably come back to you.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that oftentimes it wakes me up in the night with the solution, which I couldn't think of when I was conscious.
Yeah.
So is that the same?
That'll happen after your first sleep cycle. So we have 2 sleep cycles a night. Okay, let's all admit it. Writers don't sleep very much compared to other humans. They tend to have a short sleep cycle. So for you, it's probably after about 3 to 3.5 hours of sleep rather than 4. That's what we see for our average people. But writers and highly creative people tend to finish a cycle maybe after 2.5. Anyhow, they have short cycles. When you wake up, it means that you've gone through one complete sleep cycle and you just wake up and it feels pretty good. Unless you're one of those people who frets about not getting enough sleep, but it's perfectly natural to wake up there. Humans have 2 sleep cycles. We wake up right in the middle and have some fun with it right there. Then you go back to sleep. So yeah, that's what's happening is you just completed a full cycle and you're awake.
Interesting. Just not aware you're awake yet.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, so the way that you describe flow sounds a lot like hyperfocus and ADHD. Is there a relationship in what's going on with the brain activity?
They are different. Although I have to say people with ADHD who have hyperfocus do tend to have an easier time going into flow. But the trouble is that ADHD hyperfocus can bring you a lot of junk flow, like playing video games for 10 hours. That's not flow. You're not, you are doing something cool and you are solving some problems, but you don't have a goal of creating something brand new. You're finishing a game. I mean, I hesitate to do that because there are extremely creative gamers. There would not be esports if there weren't people who are highly creative at gaming. I'm talking about the person who's gaming as escape, And another escape hyperfocus is to binge Netflix. It's like, I don't want to think about anything, so I'm just going to see as many movies as I can. That sort of hyperfocus, we call it junk flow. It's kind of a put down. We all need that. Everybody needs to Netflix binge and everybody needs to game sometimes, but it's different from a creative state where you're creating something that's original, novel, and super appropriate and at the very limit of your abilities.
Well, one thing I've noticed is that when I'm not taking my meds, I can enter the flow much easier while writing. But when I am taking my meds, I'm better at revising.
Oh, you have got it. You've nailed it exactly. That's because the meds make you slightly depressed. There's nobody who is more perfectionistic than a depressed person. And in fact, when people go off their antidepressants, you don't immediately become depressed again. You become critical and perfectionistic. And when we're in a depressed or a moderately depressed state, I should say, which is what happens on, which is interesting. If you are taking ADHD meds, it puts you into a moderately depressed state, highly unfamiliar to you. And in that state, you become much more critical and perfectionistic, and that allows you to edit. It's interesting because many bipolar people are especially attracted to writing because during their, and I'm not talking about severe bipolar disorder, that's not creative, but hypomanic state, that means just short of actual mania. Hyperexcited, where you're feeling expansive, you're feeling expansive and you're feeling really confident. That state often leads to hours and hours and hours of productivity. And you write this amazing thing and you say, I'm a genius. Then you finally go to sleep. And when you wake up the next morning, you're hypo-depressed. You're not quite depressed, but you're down. And you look at your story and you go, oh my God, I thought this was so great. It's crap. I have got to revise this. So being mildly bipolar, I'll say normal range, you're a normal person who has these mood swings is perfect. ADHD and medication mimics that hyper aroused state followed by moderate depression, so that you've got your expansiveness and confident flow and fluency of ideation sleep followed by hypercriticality and perfectionism.
And that would be also why then caffeine is great for writing.
Yeah, it's because if you are ADHD, of course, as a stimulant, it focuses you and calms you. And I'm sad to say that the medication of choice ADHD is nicotine, but we can't treat people with nicotine. It's addictive. Yeah, but nicotine has that rare quality of being both a stimulant. It's a stimulant that also affects attention and focus. Boy, I guess I'm getting a little off track from where we are.
So thinking about the creativity in general, you were talking before, especially in the presentation at the library. I had heard a researcher who works with education and got to use a facility in Detroit because apparently a lot of schools are just closed in Detroit as a research institution, and was doing K through 12 studies and stopped just after a few years because such depressing results was that creativity peaks in third grade in the US following typical educational programs. So one of the hypotheses here is that testing has become the driver of education in this country. So what are your hypotheses about creativity's change going on with young people?
Well, we already see it. We just published an article in Frontiers of Psychology at the beginning of the year that was on creativity, the creativity and the COVID pandemic. It was called They Saw It Coming because the study actually started long before COVID. In 2014, we saw this dramatic shift in the young people coming to our lab in terms of anxiety and depression. Dramatic shift, such heightened, so much so that we went from about one suicide referral per year to 14 out of our first 47 students. And we knew something was wrong. We did a really unique thing. We asked the students themselves. So our quantitative data, when we compared the personalities from those 10 years earlier with those from 2014 on, we indeed found these shifts quantitatively. But qualitatively, when we asked the kids what's happening, these are all highly creative adolescents, when we asked them what's going on, the first thing they said is pressure. I've been tested all my life. This is the first generation to go entirely through school with No Child Left Behind testing. This is also the first generation that had so much pressure to achieve that they were more medicated than any other generation, including antipsychotics as young as 10 years old off label. But what they said is we have pressure, we have this incredible pressure to perform, to achieve, and creativity doesn't fit into that. Because I need to get A's in all my subjects, whereas we know that the typical creative person gets A's in what they love and blows off the rest. But these kids, and the typical creative professor does exactly what they want to do and never fills out their travel forms. So we know these things about creative people. So what we found out then is that the second reason the kids gave for being so depressed was the condition of the world. They saw, these are smart kids, highly aware. They saw our society destabilizing. They grew up at a time throughout that they saw the environment being destroyed. So they felt this combination of this extreme pressure to achieve academically, as well as to the idea, you're the future, you have to do all this, coupled with, oh, and by the way, the world might not even exist when you graduate. So they felt this extreme responsibility to do something while their hands were tied as adolescents to be able to go into the field where they thought they could make a difference. That was true for the kids in music, in literature, in the arts. They all felt like if I could just concentrate on my music, my art, my writing, I could make a difference.
Oh man, that sounds like horrible pressure for young people.
It is. It's intense. And so we spend a lot of time helping them to not just cope with that, but to engage in social action so that they can feel like they're a part of change.
Oh. Well, on a lighter note, so the system A here with the virtual reality and the EEG setup in a clinical environment, what does that look like?
I'm going to turn that over to Chris because he has watched 30 people go through this.
Okay.
So what it looks like is really what our goal is to try and facilitate remote counseling, and so that's really what we've been designing everything to try and facilitate. And so what that means is in terms of EEG and in the VR, the goal was to get at the common factors of healing and make sure that our technology helps counselors be able to achieve those. So for one, putting people in an environment where they feel comfortable. And so in this case, it means people at their homes. And it doesn't matter if they're in a home where they're stressed out, where everything around them, like they have all their papers and it's a mess. And like if they were on a Zoom call, they'd never be able to focus. So now what it means is put on that headset, be in this virtual environment and be in a space that is restorative, where you feel comfortable, being able to talk to your counselor, being vulnerable. And so what it looks like then is, so the way that we do it with the prototype is that, as you saw, he was connected over Zoom. So you had Zoom audio, you're talking to the counselor, and on their end, on their computer, they get to see the EEG values. They're talking with their client. There's an avatar that represents them. So the client is just talking to that avatar and they're walking together. The goal is to kind of simulate, the type of therapy where you're going on a journey together. You're walking together. Maybe it's nature therapy. You're side by side. It's kind of a partnership. And so the counselors will see, they'll see the EEGs, and it's really just there for them to play off of when something interesting happens. Like if they notice a spike, normally in face-to-face, maybe they notice that by like a strong reaction to a question. Now they'll see it as a spike because it's in VR and they're not seeing the person's face. And so maybe they can ask about it. So we had at the library one of the counselors that did a bunch of the ones in the summer. And I remember he did one of the counseling sessions in the summer. And one of the subjects that came out was like, just felt really validated. It was after we went through all the studies and the surveys and stuff, but he wanted to talk to me about it. I remember saying like he kept realizing exactly what I was thinking, and like before I was like willing to say that that's how I was thinking, and it was and so but what he felt very validated because Christopher, another Chris I know, was saying that was just like noticing that he was going through this issue, was anxious about this thing, and really validating that that was a real struggle and that was real. It wasn't made up. And they were able to show it with EEG as well. So it was like another rationale of like, you know, this is really something that is bothering you. It's not something that you're making up in your head. And so that's one way that can really work.
So, how do you suppose the upcoming virtual reality spaces, things like Meta, but hopefully better ones, are going to help or hurt this kind of therapy?
Well, I think it's complicated. I mean, I'm a grad student that really focused on like really this application, but I've kind of seen a little bit in the field. I worked at a company that was doing virtual reality for phobias and anxieties, which is more like exposure therapy, and I've been doing a lot of research of what's out there. I think if you do it the right way, virtual reality is a really, really powerful tool because it can make you feel like you're there in that space. And that can be powerful in a good way or a bad way, because like if you have really control over where someone is and they feel like they're there, it can be, and you take advantage of it, maybe that's a problem. But if you're doing that to put them in an environment where they're feeling safe and comfortable, and knowing that there is an outside world to go back to, but then it can be really useful. We can see that just in like going into VR for mindfulness, or going into and to relax, or going into VR to confront things that you're scared of, because it can give you this really real experiences. It feels like you're almost there, but you don't have to like go on a plane. Instead, you're in VR and you're simulating, you know, takeoff and landing and everything. And with Meta and with social, the metaverse, it's really interesting to see where it could go, because it could go a lot of ways. But it's just kind of the next, well, it's just kind of another form of media that potentially like can give really strong emotional reactions. And so it's really about the humans and the people that are developing things, and where they feel like they can take it, and how people use it. Because I feel like we're trying to talk about like before movies were made, like what that means, and you just don't know.
Yeah. Like what will movies be like?
Yeah.
Well,
Or the internet.
Exactly. But on that note, then, what sort of like speculative ideas might you have already been considering, like things like if this goes on, or what if, or what could possibly go wrong, you know, like this sort of thing would be useful for writers to.
Well, I think if we're talking about counseling, just because that's where I'm most comfortable talking about it, one thing that we found is like we had really good results of the counseling sessions, that everyone had really positive experiences in their sessions, but we had kind of average results on like immersion and presence in terms of VR. And I think incorporating more interactivity to make you feel like you're really in the environment, like maybe you can pick up things in the environment. With counseling, like I remember reading about well, there's this wonderful 3D artist. I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on their name, but they use the Google Tilt Brush, which is a form of VR where you can kind of paint in 3D, and they make these beautiful things. And one of the things that came out from this was like an artist depiction of what it's like to be depressed, and it was like this beautiful art piece in VR. And I just think there's a lot of things that you can do. Like I remember Barb and I were talking about, well, maybe you could like build things in VR that represent some of your feelings, but now you get to visualize it and get to see it, and take things like there already is that technology in like the gaming world of like, you know, just like Minecraft and things like that, where you're building the environment in the space. And one of the papers I was reading from my dissertation about nature therapy, one of the things that they did is they had it was for like elementary school kids, and this one kid was doing school counseling, and he hated being in like the counseling office at the elementary school. So they took him out into the backyard or like the lawn of the school, and they had this little forest, and basically let him pick where to do the counseling session. And then every day he would like pick sticks up and rocks and like built this little cool like kind of like little cool like fort in the woods, and that's where he had his counseling session. It'd be really cool to see if you could take some of those things that really work well in the real world, and really people are really creative about where they can have counseling sessions, how they can make things comforting, but now like without the confines of like what the real world has, like the virtual world, it can be a lot more.
Yeah.
So.
You know, I've read studies that talk about just being in nature for like 40 minutes is enough to reset creativity. Is that why you chose the kind of environment you did here? And is that what you're suggesting, like going deeper into that?
Yeah.
We studied restorative environments.
Yeah, there's a lot of research about what makes an environment restorative, what makes an environment conducive to therapy. And one of there's other ways that you can have this, but it's just been associated for centuries and centuries of going back to nature as something that's healing. And it happens in like cross-culturally, it happens all around the world, of going out into nature is a really healing experience. And so that's kind of the first thing that you look for when you're going into VR is like, well, let's get them into an environment where it feels like they're out in nature and it feels like they're connected to the outside world or to the natural environment.
Is there anything else that you would maybe like to share, ideas that you might want to suggest to people who are, you know, creative individuals who are thinking about this sort of thing, how it might?
We need your feedback.
Okay.
We need people to write us and tell us what they think, how they would like to use this, if you can imagine how a library might be able to have headsets like this available. Whatever you think an application might be, we'd like to hear from you. And, you know, we're happy to travel around and bring it to, you know, to everything from schools to libraries to say, here's our ideas. What are yours about how this could be used?
Cool. All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and really appreciate your doing this. And we'll be editing these things too.
That's great.
We'll be editing these things together to make sure that we have the demonstrations that you were showing us as well as your slides and put it into the presentation. And
Sounds good.
Thank you for being our demonstration person.
My pleasure.
And I bet you've already imagined what kind of research we could do with this. We just thought, well, Chris, I think that at Cleos we should maybe put together a research team to study the teaching people about their flow in VR.
Yeah.
It's just another application that we should try.
That would be really cool.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Research project.
And we just hope we get enough writers to sign up for Cleos because they're ideal subjects for this.
Well, I'll definitely spread the word among, you know, our writers and our alums who.
That's great.
Because everybody is searching for that elusive flow and how best to do it. Biofeedback like this is a powerful way to.
It really is. Well, we'll be doing it every Friday, February through May. So for like 10 weeks, we'll have that available. And I just think we should study it. You know, I was just going to do it as a service. And, you know, our counselors get the chance to do some counseling. But I thought, wow, maybe we should study what impact it actually has on reifying flow. You know, like, do they know what it is? Does it make any changes in them that are cool, you know?
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about this.
this tool, could somebody get that just for themselves?
Absolutely.
The Muse, yes.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
kind
the
of-
Muse headset's available. Sure, there's a lot of apps, that you can do. And but my dream would be, since it's not expensive as people think it is.
Right.
Was this about 150 for Muse?
Muse, I think, is 200.
It's 200. There's cheaper ones, but Muse is great. And Neurosky doesn't make it anymore, right?
Well, yeah, you have to buy it on like eBay.
I have 5 Neurosky headsets, which are now virtually
They're all
useless.
used.
Yeah, but there are other, but they're not the only
Yeah, there's a
headset.
lot of
There's a
them.
lot of them. Emotive is one. So you can get those, but we would have to ideally we'd find a manufacturer who would put the headset, put the VR and that together, so that people can just buy it right off the shelf, or have therapists buy it right off the shelf and make it available to their clients.
That would be neat. I wonder if it would be a distraction to the person to watch EEG ones.
Well, they don't in the app we have right now,
Okay.
but many want to see it, so we have to figure out a way to screen grab and to be able to say, hey, look, this was your brain when you went into flow.
Yeah.
Because we used to
Well,
do
we
that
can-
with the brain
Because
flow.
I'm curious now.
We'd
We can
screen grab it.
record.
What's that?
I could have recorded it, but I didn't.
That's
I was just
okay.
streaming it.
Just so we can, but I think we could screen grab pretty easily and say, this is your brain on flow. We used to give them brain flow. We used to give them a picture of their, it used to be a flower. And boy, do we need better than just those. That we've got to find a way to at least make it pillars or flower-like Neurosky used to. They had a thing that went like this in and out. We need better visualization, is what I'm saying. So we got to find somebody who knows how to do that. Can you even do that in MATLAB?
Not well, probably.
Huh?
Not well, probably.
Well, we can find somebody who can do it.
But that's true,
Yeah.
because going through the process, I would like to see that
Sure,
Yeah.
you'd like it.
scientific feedback. Like, okay, show me my brain. That would be
Yes.
so cool.
And I think that's the best way to do it, is to show them afterwards so
Mhm.
that they're not distracted by opening up their eyes, which our kids would do. They'd open their eyes to kind of look and see what they were looking like on the big screen.
Yes, yes. And that happened with me when you just put the, what was it again, EG?
Yeah.
On, and then I was looking at how my
So,
brain was
whoa,
working. I was like,
okay,
oh my
that's
gosh.
happening.
So if I think about this, what would that do?
Mhm.
And then I saw it spiking. So that was
Isn't
funny.
it cool? I
Mhm.
know, I love that.
Becomes sort of a meta experience than that.
Yes.
It does. It does.
All right.
So how did I do, by the way?
Oh my gosh, you were such a great subject, because you really, you very deftly enter. I mean, besides accomplished writers and artists, musicians, the only other people I know of that can switch consciousness states so rapidly are shamans. Healers, indigenous healers tend to, since from the time they're little children,
Right.
they learn to deliberately practice altering their consciousness. And then, of course, advanced meditators, though they tend to be just good at the meditation thing, but indigenous shamans know how to use all different kinds of everything from riggers like running and dancing to sort of sensory deprivation. They know how to get different consciousness states out of different experiences. It's wild to see. Yeah.
This is so exciting. Thank you very much, by the way, for doing this. This will be great to be able to share with folks, because a large percentage of the people who participate in what we do aren't local
Yeah.
or can't make it to places.
It's a dream come true for me to be combining science fiction, being in this space, VR, EEG, healing, creativity.
Mhm.
Man, I'm in flow.